Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now, where we get to meet all types of amazing women and moms that we're either introduced to or families that come through the platform whose stories inspire us. And I can think of no one better to invite to this podcast than our next guest, who is a beautiful mother of three, who we got to know in the most tragic of circumstances. And while obviously today she will share the sad part of her story, I also know that there is a lot of inspiration to be gleaned from everything that she has experienced and where she finds herself now. So with that, Meredith Lewis, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a real privilege.
Of course. Meredith, I would love for those that don't know your story, I'd love, if you're comfortable, for you to share kind of what brought you to Support Now and brings you to this podcast today.
Absolutely. So last April 2023, my husband deployed with his Osprey squadron to Australia. We were probably in the Marine Corps about 15 years. He was the executive officer of the squadron, and we had been stationed in Hawaii for a little over a year. And so we were pretty comfortable, quite settled, lived on base, had a really strong community. And for he and I, this was, I think, his fifth deployment. And for two of our three girls, it was their first deployment. He deployed shortly after we had our first daughter when we were living in Okinawa, Japan, from the time she was 4 months to 9 months. And then subsequent to that, we had a stretch where he wasn't deploying, he was an instructor. And so we just kept making babies, and he was home every night. And it was about as normative and structured as you can be in the Marine Corps for a period of time. And so I wasn't really afraid or nervous. Like I said, our time in Hawaii was the strongest and kind of most cohesive community we had in our tenure throughout, different duty stations and tours and deployments, in part because of the season of life we were in, having been married over 10 years, having young children. And so I had found an incredible support group of other moms who had kids that were similarly aged. We were homeschooling at the time. We had a really strong church community. So there were just a lot of foundational elements in place that made me think, okay, this deployment it's just another check in the box. We've done it. There's nothing to be afraid of. He's going to a first world country. He's going to an allied country. It's not a combat zone. This is going to be a cakewalk. So fast forward to August, 4 months into a 6-month deployment. He texted me on a Saturday morning in Hawaii. Darwin, Australia is 19 and a half hours ahead of Hawaii. So he was waking up Sunday morning his time. And for the duration of the deployment, Sunday was a no-fly day. It was always reserved for maintenance. And so he texted me that morning and said, "Hey, good morning, beautiful." And I asked him, I said, "Are you headed into church?" And he said, "No, we're flying today." And I thought it was a little odd. Normally he was really good about giving me a heads up if the schedule was changing or if he specifically was going to fly. But his verbiage said, "We are flying today." And so I responded and I said, "Are you flying?" Just out of curiosity. And he never responded, which I didn't think anything of at the time because of the nature of his position. His office door was always open. People were always barging in. He was, running in and out of meetings all the time. So I just thought, he got pulled into something. The girls and I had a really beautiful Saturday. Great standard day in Hawaii. They're always postcard perfect. And we were walking back to our base house from a park that evening, and I looked down at my phone, and it was just blowing up with phone calls and text messages from all of the younger wives in the squadron, of whom I was the oldest, right? Matriarch. And so I called back the first number that I had missed. And she said, "What do you know? What do you know? My husband's flying today. I know he's flying today. What have you heard?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? What is going on?" And she's like, "Osprey went down in Australia. An Osprey was down. An Osprey crashed." I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, "Let me get home. Let me check the headlines. Let me make some phone calls." The longer you're either the service member or married to a service member, I think regardless of your rank, regardless of your job, you will experience mishaps and like the worst of possible nightmare situations. And so many of them get blown out of proportion. The news misrepresents them. Narratives aren't controlled. The rumor mill kind of goes nuts. And I've learned that often it's not as bad, as the news or media would want you to believe. But more than that, the powers that be keep a really, really tight grip on communication. And so one of the ways that they protect that is they will confiscate everybody's cell phones or turn off internet communication. And it's called going River City. That's what they'll call it on deployments. We're going to go River City for 72 hours, no comms outbound. And so I just started trying to get back to as many wives as I could. I was like, stop calling. They cannot answer. They're not going to call you. The less you hear, the better it is. I get home, I check all the headlines, and the news really knew nothing, but they were reporting U.S. Osprey goes down, no casualties, no fatalities, no casualties, no fatalities, 20 Marines exit Osprey. And I was like, it's a hard landing. That sucks and it's scary, but if no one died, that's still a good day, right? It is the best and the worst of circumstances. So I went to bed, fed my kids nuggets and mac and cheese, threw them in the bath, got them in bed. We said our prayers. And I just remember thinking to myself, I kept checking and kept refreshing. No casualties, no fatalities. I was like, we'll hear from him when the dust settles. And my doorbell rang at 2:30 in the morning. And I honestly, my first thought, it was the loudest sound I've ever heard. The fact that I fell asleep at all, looking back, is kind of counterintuitive, but it was the loudest, most resounding chime. And I was immediately fully alert and completely awake. I grabbed my husband's robe and I ran downstairs as gently as I could. All three of the girls were asleep downstairs. And I thought it was a wife because I had told a bunch of them, I said, hey, listen, if you are too scared to stay at your home tonight, come to my house. You can sleep in my guest room. You can sleep on my couch. I will stay up with you, but please try to sleep. They are fine. So I really thought it was just a young wife who couldn't. And as I approached the front door, there was this thin pane of glass next to the front door, and backlit by the street light was a uniformed Marine officer, covered. And I knew. It was just immediate because they don't wear that uniform. They don't wake you up. And there are so many formalities to the outworking of the procedures. It either they know or they don't, and they don't come to you if they don't know. So I opened the door, and he said, Mrs. Lewis, my name is Major Huckabee. I have news regarding your husband. May we please come in? And Navy chaplain was standing next to him. And I don't remember. I know that the shock was instantaneous. And that in and of itself, that physiological outworking of how your body will just respond to a traumatic event and for the sake of preservation, mentally, emotionally, what your body does that you're not aware of, in my case, until months after the fact, is pretty remarkable. So I have memory, but not, it's very kind of sparse. It's pocketed, what I remember and what I don't. But I remember very vividly taking them back upstairs and sitting on the couch and then just said there was a mishap. There are Marines unaccounted for. And they gave me an acronym that I had never heard. That basically it was kind of this, it was called Dustwind, I think. They were we're waiting to figure out where he is. Where do you mean? Where do you think that he could be? I was like, he wasn't even supposed to be flying today. So I no, he's on the manifest, but we're waiting for DNA results. So what should have tipped me off, right? If you're waiting on DNA results, then someone has not survived. But in the moment, I just remember thinking why do you need DNA results if you don't know where he is? So the language, I felt really bad, not in the moment, but later, I just felt so bad for the people who have to come and deliver that kind of news to you, because this isn't necessarily what they're trained to, right? Every Marine officer is on call to be a casualty affairs coordinating officer, CACO, right? So in the event that month that something happens, you suit up and then you get a script and you learn how to be a Keiko as you're going through it. So this poor schmuck didn't come having done this before, having delivered this kind of news before. He had been on island like all of 6 months. He didn't know who my husband was. Not that he should have, but there was just, there was no context for him.
Right.
But all that to say, he is still one of my favorite people on planet Earth. He's really, really one of the best. So I was very fortunate that he was selected. He took extraordinary care of the girls and I, and worked really, really hard as an advocate, especially early on, because it was a fire hose of information, not only for him, but for us, obviously. And early on, it was information that was constantly changing and being updated or modified, so it was really hard to keep a lot of the details straight.
Meredith, what do you remember about telling the girls?
I waited until later that afternoon, when my youngest, Ellie, was 2 at the time. She went down for a nap. And that night when I was getting the girls ready for bed, they were like, "Well, Mommy, why are so many people calling you?" I said, "Well, there was a Osprey accident in Australia, and we don't know if people are hurt, and we don't know who was flying." I said, "But a lot of the families are scared, but," I said, "we're going to pray. I don't think anybody's hurt. I think we're okay. We're going to go to bed." Subsequent to that, the next day, Ellie was sleeping. We had lunch, and 2 of my closest friends were over, showed up in the middle of the night and then stayed with me and suggested, they're like, "Look, don't tell them right away when they wake up. Let's go to the beach. Let's have a beautiful morning together. Let's just like slow roll normalcy," which was so wise because it was a really beautiful morning. So I put each of my big girls on either side of me, and my best friends, Jamie and Sydney Bunce, were there. Jamie's also an Osprey pilot, and Sid I had known since she was a girlfriend. I said, "Girls, do you remember the Osprey accident Mommy told you about?" I said, "Yeah, did someone get hurt?" I said, "Yeah." And I paused. I said, "The good news is that we know Daddy's with Jesus." And my eldest immediately started crying. She was 6. And my middle looked at me. She said, "Wait, Daddy's in heaven for real life?" I said, "Yeah, baby. He is in heaven for real life right now." I said, "And that's good. Like, we know that to be true, and that is better." I said, "But it's just really hard inside for us right now." So Lydia, my eldest, just wept and had like really big questions and big concerns immediately. I mean, she's a 6-year-old, but with like the mind of an 85-year-old. Like, she's just this old soul. And she's like, "When do we have to move? How long can we stay? Do you have to get a job?" Like, in her mind, the implication was nothing can stay the same. Everything is different immediately, And Nora, my middle, who was 4 at the time, it was, I think looking back now, I can see that the way that the shock affected her, she and my husband had a particularly unique and special bond. She got up very calmly. She grabbed her blanket and her daddy doll, which we had gotten them like Hug a Hero daddy dolls for Christmas a couple months before. And she went and got in my bed and fell asleep. And she probably hadn't napped in like 2 years. So she just shut down. So it was terrible. And I don't know. Looking back, I'm like, should I have done it different? Could I have done it better? Should I have done it individually? Should I have done it? And I don't know. I don't know how you do it. A year later, I'm like, I don't know what I would have done different. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know to expect that they both wouldn't start crying.
Yeah. Well, and just like that officer, no one tells you how to deliver news like this. That's not in the mom handbook.
No.
So I'm just so it's so moving. In the way you describe it, like I can truly like visualize it in my head. It's powerful. How hard was it to allow yourself to grieve while also having to protect your girls?
I don't know that I felt like I had bandwidth to grieve. until like February, to be honest. And I joked about this for a long time, even when nothing in my life has been like hard or traumatic. I just have a very delayed response time to change. I get real task oriented. Like when there's kind of a heightened level of stress, my vision gets real focused on like what are the action steps? What can I do? How do I produce not productivity for productivity's sake, but like how do I gain momentum towards getting on the backside of whatever this is? How do we get the dust to settle more quickly? And so that was Sunday. The 27th of August was a Sunday. We were wheels up to Dover on Friday. We went straight from Dover to Denver. And we were there for a little over 2 weeks while we waited for him. And then took them a long time to prepare him. And then we had like 3 days of events. There was a dignified transfer that was this big media thing through Denver. When he arrived home, the celebration of life was Friday, the graveside military was Saturday, and then we were like out of there on Sunday morning back to Hawaii. So that took us to like the end of September. It's wild. However prepared you feel you may be in terms of finances and wills, and Tobe was a very organized, methodical, well-planned, well-prepared husband and father. Everything was in order. And it was still a full-time job for me because every account, every credit card, everything that had his name and my name, I had to send a death certificate to every single institution to say it has to just be my name. And then all the procedural outworkings of whatever those implications were, even for it to go really smoothly. I was the only one that could make that phone call. I was the only one who could give my consent. And I had even, gotten my dad, I think, a power of attorney thinking, okay, we're going to two-time this, right? He can help me in this area and then I'll do this. And still there were just so many, and that's not a complaint. It's just, you're the only decision maker left, really. No matter how much people want to help you, like it has to be your word. It has to be your voice. It has to be your fingerprint. And so I enrolled the girls in a local school. We were previously homeschoolers, so then it was preparing them for that, which was this very stark 180 that demanded a lot of my attention and energy, thinking like, is this right? If it's just for now, will they be okay so that I can take care of the things that only I can take care of, to circle back around to being able to give them all of me when this is handled. But I can't delay these things, right? And by the grace of God, they assimilated very easily. Their teachers were extraordinary, loved them so well. And it gave us structure to adapt to, which I desperately needed. I'm a very routine-oriented person. I love me some structure. I mean, to the point where it's like so boring. But when you have littles, structure and redundancy is like really stabilizing, right? And when your world gets pulled out from under you and you really don't know how long you're going to be allowed to stay in your home or where to go or, where you belong, that was a big part of feeling frozen. Was he was the only man I'd ever dated, or marriage I'd ever been a part of. He was a Marine from the day that I married him. Like the Marine Corps community was like all we knew in terms of identity and belonging and how to exist. We'd always lived on bases. I was like, I don't know how to go back to being a civilian, and I have zero desire to do it. I was like, I don't know how I transfer with all of this life experience that's really unique, really nuanced. This is all my girls know. There's like guys walking around with the same haircut and the same uniform. Like, how does that translate? Where do we go fit in?
I want to pause you for a second, because one of the things that's really striking to me as I listen to you talk is I think the perception of grief to most people is a woman or a man curled up in a ball crying for days and days and days. And I think what you're highlighting is a really important point around what grief can look like. And I also think it highlights a lot of what widows feel, with especially widows with young kids, is that it's not that you can't grieve, but there is so many other things that you have to do.
You have to compartmentalize.
Again, you're doing such a beautiful job of describing what you actually went through. And I think it's so different than when people hear what happened to you, they're thinking of a version of Meredith that doesn't represent what Meredith is actually dealing with.
It was surprising to me. I for months, one of my biggest fears was like, I'm not grieving. I'm functioning. I'm going through the motions. I'm getting shit done, but I'm not feeling anything. And I remember telling my friends, I was like, did I love him? Does it matter to me? Do I care? Because by all metrics on paper, I'm kind of killing it. Like I've got all these applications in and I've responded to all these things, and not like events and things, but like I'm showing up. My kids are in school. We're going to church. We're still participating. We have permission to stay on base up to 3 years. I have like written off making any major decision regarding moving. I'm not going to make any major sudden changes or movements. I was like, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to make a rash decision. And part of it was the squadron was still 2 months out from coming home. So there was an element, I think, of I was still in deployment mode, right? Like we came home from Denver and all of his funeral services, and nobody else's husbands were home. So in my mind, I was like, no one else has their husband either. Not a victim. This is still a team effort to finish this thing well, to get everybody back. And then it was holidays. November and December are a real bitch because you have the Marine Corps birthday, which is November 10th, and always the Marine Corps ball. That was our first date back in 2010. So that's a significant thing. And I went to the squadron ball that, month after they got home, because in my mind I was like, I don't want to be anywhere else than with the people that I shared him with. I want to be as close to him as possible, and that's with these people. I belong with these people. And then our wedding anniversary is the 12th, and then my birthday is in November, and then it's Christmas, and then it's his birthday 3 days after Christmas. So like November and December have always been these really emotionally memory charged weeks for us. Had family in and out a lot, visitors and long-term guests that just wanted to come be with us, which to each their own. Did it serve me at the time? Yes. Did it delay my being able to sit still and be quiet? Yeah. I wasn't in my home alone for 4 months after his passing. And in part, I was scared to be home alone, quiet and sitting still.
Yeah.
But by end of January, I remember thinking like, I don't like that I'm not crying myself to sleep every night. I don't like how surprised people are when they see me. They're like, oh my God, you look really nice today. I'm like, well, yeah, I showered, shaved my legs. I got ready. Like, I'm not just, when people are surprised that you're better by outward metrics than they think they would be or anticipated you would be, you start to kind of wonder, I'm like, well, am I just a fraud? Am I doing it wrong? For me, that was the dialogue. And so once the last of our guests finally left, like mid-January, I'm not kidding, like we had family basically move in with us from like September through January. Every night once the girls went down, I was like, how do I crack? Like, how can I break myself? Because I don't like it's building. I feel it. You feel it in your body. Grief is wildly physical. I do know that I was grieving because the toll that it took on me physiologically. The people that were closest to me, they were like, you don't look good. And I was like, I feel fine. They're like, okay, great. You don't look good. I lost weight. And your body just changes. Like it is a thing that your organs filter all of the hormones, all of the grief, all that emotion. Like I had a kidney infection that was really hard to kick for a long time. Your Your body gets tired of carrying it. And so end of January, I finally got kind of pissed at myself. I was like, this is dumb. I want to cry for him. And so I got on YouTube and I just systematically went through every single news report I could find, from breaking, U.S. MV-22 Osprey goes down in like the first, to like the aerial video of his procession through Denver. And the last video I found was actually of all the radio calls that they released. And I just listened to all the pilots in the air circling overhead, calling in for emergency support. And I think that finally did me in, because his voice wasn't there.
Yeah. It broke the dam.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've actually begun the process of healing? Or are you still in the busyness and the over-functioning kind of tendency to just go, go, go?
Yes. It's yes. It's to both. Part of it is because I think the propensity to be busy, to be aware of what needs to be done, what hasn't been, tended to, trying to anticipate what needs to be done so I don't get behind. That's habitual. At some point, you do it because it's better than sitting quietly still alone in your home. And it also has to be done at some point, and there's no one else to take those reins, right? Part of it is it's the tension of, I'm the only one that there is to handle it. And it gives me purpose. It gives me structure. It is some form or standardization of, hey, look, I'm doing it. That's what I think that's the hardest part of grief for me, has been, not only is it not linear, there was nothing about, and still to this day, nothing about the progression or succession of the ebbs and flows or the eddies of grief that I have found myself in that makes a lick of sense to me. When I get trapped over here, or when I'm freed up and feel really alive. Not because I don't miss him, but because when we dropped him off at the hangar in April, the girls and I helped him carry in like all his sea bags. We took a picture in the hangar all together. He's in his uniform. And we walked us back to the minivan, and he took a moment with each girl to hold her and look at her, and then put her in her car seat. And then I was last. There's a lot I love about my husband. He liked me a lot. I know that he was into me, right? But it wasn't like a verbal way. Not with words. He would never be like, you're so hot. He wasn't like he was a man of few words. And he never used hot. He didn't use beautiful. He'd be like, I think you're cute. I'm like, oh, damn it, I'm not 13. I would like a little, I'm 30, whatever. And I've got 3 kids, and this is the mom butt I have left. Like, you've seen it in all its, give me a little. So all that to say is the best compliment he could have given me, and like a really beautiful foreshadowing looking back. But I was the last one to get spoken to and kissed and put in the car. And he just looked at me and said, you're such a strong woman. You're going to be fine. You're really good at what it is that we're doing. And I'm so proud of you. I'm not worried at all. And so for all the years that we were married, and all the times he would get frustrated at me about how bad I was at receiving a compliment from him, which I would exhort every wife. If your husband makes the effort to speak life into you, he will stop if you don't say, thanks, baby. I hear you, and it matters, and I'm gonna let it take root. They will stop if you don't let it land somewhere. Like, that was a fight we had at one point. Because especially for the man who is not verbal, it takes a lot more vulnerability and effort for them to offer that up. And so one time he chided me a little bit. He's like, listen, I'm saying it because I mean it, and words matter, and you act like you don't care. So I heard him, and I know that he meant it. And we talked, we obviously spoke over the course of the 4 months that he was deployed.
Yeah.
But that send-off will always stick with me. Not because we didn't think he wasn't coming home, just because we were about to do life in tandem, continents apart, still as a team, but just by necessity, independent of one another.
Yeah, and I think it's supernatural to want to cling to the thing that gives you the most sense of strength and hope and a path forward. I truly could talk to you forever. I like, this has been so beautiful hearing you talk about this experience and the way that you have. My final question is, how are you doing today?
I feel pretty steady. I wouldn't say I'm like thriving, just because I'm so used to moving. I'm good at moving, and I'm good at establishing a new home and, adapting to a new place. And I usually give myself like 6 to 9 months to be really like, this place sucks, and like, and work that out of my system till I like find the grocery store I like and find the best route to this coffee shop, and, at least have some semblance of people I start recognizing in places that we frequent. What's so different and uncomfortable about this move and this home and this time is that like we don't have a hard stop. Every other time we've moved, you have this guarantee of like, okay, well, you're going to be in receipt of orders in like, 2 years, and then you're 6 months out before your move. And so you're never anywhere for more than 2 to 3 years. And I love the change and the adventure and kind of just that get out of jail free card, right? As you start to enter some awkward, like first fights with mom friends, or like you say the wrong thing at the Christmas party, you're like, no worries, we're not gonna be here next Christmas. Like, it's really, that's what is so disconcerting to me is like, I don't know how to put down like deep roots, and I don't know that I want to. But unsolicited, unprovoked, when the girls have these like spectacular days at school and they're just having the best time in their stability, right? Their home, their room, their school, the redundancy of their routine. They've said to me, my eldest two, without me really going and looking for it or asking, they're like, we really like it here. We feel, my eldest, she's like, I'm so settled. I'm so glad to be settled. I'm like, so on the one hand, I'm like, thank you, Lord, that despite me, they don't sense in me how restless I am, or that it's not dependent on all the ways I feel like I'm falling short in creating stability for them, that they have found stability. That to me is what quells sadness or fear about just the lack of change or the lack of diversity or anticipating like the next thing.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like you're truly wrestling now with this new lifestyle change. It's not just the fact that you're doing it alone. It's the fact that your life you'll never be able to approach that life the same. I mean, I suppose you could, but it's not going to be through the lens of someone saying it's time for you. So you're having to get comfortable with the idea of permanence.
Yes. Yeah. And it's also, it's interesting to, I, by label, was always a civilian, right? I was just a dependent of a service member. But I never considered myself a civilian. And now really living in like suburbia in a big city where everyone's a commuter or working from home, I see in faces of people I meet, like, they don't know what to do with me. And I equally am like, I also don't know how to relate to you. Your life as a CPA from 9 to 5 sounds boring as hell. And I'm so sorry that you have tassels on your loafers and you don't know how to like go out and do something hyper tactical.
Amazing.
Listen, CPAs, God bless them. But it's just, I mean, especially too, like if I think a lot of people assume I'm divorced. And so the conversational arc is very benign. It's very organic. It's very short. And then there's this hard stop at widow. And then people really don't know what to do with you. Because it's like, oh, we're new to the area. Really? Where did you move from? Oh, we lived in Hawaii. What took you to Hawaii? My husband was in the military. Oh, my word. Thank you for your service. What does he do now? Like, he's no longer with us. Oh, my God. And like, where do you go? Not 50% of the women that I speak to, that exact verbatim conversation ends in tears for them. And I feel terrible. I really do. I feel bad
Yeah.
that I make people and uncomfortable. That's been the other hard part of moving is like, it's a very ostracizing, oscillating feeling to be like, I'm really afraid to share my story with you because then there's not really this logical place to put me. Like being widowed is like this other category.
And there's no other way to say it. I mean, you're not gonna, like, put out a press release that, new family to
Yeah.
in suburb is it's just like, where do you go? How do you articulate that in a way? Because 'cause I'm sure it's not super fun for you to be able to have to share that, and it sounds like you're projecting already what they're gonna feel, and so that might, affect, like, how many people you wanna talk to and open up to, 'cause, like, do I wanna go there today? I mean, it's complicated, it's layered.
Especially when the girls are with me. Sometimes the elevator speech, I'm like, I really want to be kind and responsive to someone who strikes up a conversation, right? Or like if we try a new church or whatever the case may be. But if my kids are with me, I'm like, I mean, it's not like they don't know, but how often do they have to hear it repeated and then be given the look of pity and sympathy by someone that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need them constantly feeling like they also are these pariahs, you know?
Yeah, no, it's tricky, and you also don't want them to feel you want them to grieve and to honor him in their own way and other people's emotions towards that, towards what happened. You don't want that to begin to creep in to become their narrative. They might be in a great place with him and how they're choosing to honor him, and so having to see that. I mean, everything you're talking about right now, I, respect so much. Like, this is the honest conversation about grief. This is the important conversation because what you see on social media, what you hear and read, even like anecdotally or in books, it's the platitudes. And what you're sharing today is the reality. And I'm looking at a woman that you just shared with us what grief really is as a mom, or what it can be as a mom. And so it's just a wonderful reminder, I believe, to supporters and to communities that want to show up. To first of all, don't be so allured by the way someone looks, because there's a lot more that might meet the eye. And I wrote down what you said. You have a delayed response time to things.
I do, yeah.
That's a real thing.
And I think one widow told me her husband was killed in an Osprey accident a couple of years ago. Actually, my husband was her husband's instructor. So we didn't know each other at the time, but it's a sweet overlap. And I think I confided in her. I never met her in person, just via like Facebook or some such. I was like, I don't cry myself to sleep every night. And that concerns me. And she's like, because there are so many decisions that are immediate. And it's hard to discern which ones are immediate and which ones feel urgent, but actually can be delayed. Like being able to decipher and not only delegate, but just have the clarity of thought about each and every decision, whether it's whatever the case may be. She said shock is a really excellent shield. And I found that to be true. I mean, I'm not kidding when people are like, when do you start grieving? Or your question earlier, it's like, it really was February. Like, I think the residual effects of shock really gave me 6 months.
Sorry to interrupt, but it was just so sudden. I think this is also where nuance in loss is so important. And again, none is easier than the other, but it is very different. If you have a cancer diagnosis and there are weeks and months where you are on that journey and you can see and anticipate, that's a different type of hard, but it's different
Right.
than what you experience, which is the knock at the door. And
Especially because, and a lot of people don't know this, I flew down to Australia the week before to see him. I had just been with him for like barely 72 hours. It was a real last minute, spur of the moment, spontaneous thing. he was participating in an air show as the demo pilot at this like big to-do on the Gold Coast of Australia. And he was like, do you want to come down? We won't tell anybody. I was like, for sure. Yeah. So that was one thing I told the Keiko when he was sitting in my living room was I was like, I just saw him. Like, I know you're not supposed to know that. I know I wasn't supposed to go, but I literally, like, I just saw him and he was fine.
Well, Meredith, you are amazing. So real. I am so confident that there are people out there that are listening that can find a lot of inspiration from what you've shared and just the realness of it all, the authenticity of it all. And in some ways, the thing that's so striking to me about this conversation is just how in it you still are. I mean, you're still so early in the journey. And so things are changing, obviously, constantly, just given the realities of establishing a new normal. But what a delight to finally meet you. And thank you. Like, thank you for being willing to talk about this, because this is really where I think this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where people can truly understand what it feels like, so that they can better show up for the people that they love. And then just as a final note, we were honored to play a very small role in Meredith's journey through Support Now and helping to shield all that support, whether that was money, meals, volunteers, prayer. And so if anyone out there is experiencing something similar and needs help with providing that shield, please consider Support Now. And
it was instrumental, that website and that organization, and just the cohesive, singular place where communication could be easily sought, dispensed, updated. Like, that was just a game changer. It was one less, just the coordinating efforts that were consolidated in that one spot were incredible. Not for me, but for everyone who used the tool on my behalf.
Yeah.
It was such a gift.
Of course. All right, Meredith, thank you so much. Wishing you well this holiday season. Thanks.